Have you ever woken up from a bad dream only to realize you're living in one? That's how I felt. The darkness was suffocating, wrapping around me like a thick, oppressive blanket. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence. The first thing I remember was the smell, musty, like old carpet and stale air. It was the kind of smell that clings to your clothes and seeps into your skin, making you feel dirty and uncomfortable. I drew in a sharp breath. It caught in my throat, a mix of fear and the stale, heavy air. My lungs burned as I tried to take in more oxygen, but it felt like I was breathing through a straw. I tasted dust and something faintly metallic. The taste was bitter, coating my tongue and making me want to gag. It was like I had been chewing on old pennies. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog in my mind. It was a primal fear, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your hair stand on end. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. I was lying on something hard, my arms pinned to my sides. Where was I? The surface beneath me was unforgiving, pressing into my back and making it ache. I tried to move, but my limbs felt like they were encased in concrete. My eyelids felt heavy, glued shut. It was as if they were weighed down by invisible chains, refusing to obey my commands. I had to force them open, using every ounce of strength I had. I forced them open. Darkness, pitch black. Panic swelled, choking me. It was a darkness so complete it felt like it was alive, pressing in on me from all sides. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I tried to calm myself. I struggled against, what? Ropes? Duct tape? My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The bindings were tight, cutting into my skin and making it impossible to move. I thrashed, but the restraints held firm. I was trapped. The more I struggled, the tighter they seemed to become, digging into my flesh and leaving me feeling even more helpless. The metallic scent was stronger now. Blood. Was I hurt? I couldn't tell where the blood was coming from, but the smell was overpowering, making my head spin. I strained to remember what happened, but my mind was a blank canvas. It was like trying to grasp at smoke, the memories slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to hold on. Fear was a scream building in my chest, begging to be released. It clawed at my throat, desperate to escape, but I couldn't let it out. I was too afraid of what might happen if I did. But something held me back, a small, rational part of my mind that told me to stay quiet, to stay calm. It was the only thing keeping me from completely losing control. A small, sane voice whispered in the dark, "Don't panic." It sounded like me. It was a lifeline, a tiny thread of hope that I clung to with everything I had. I had to stay calm. I had to find a way out. Hello? Is anyone there? My voice was a strained whisper, rough with disuse. It felt like ages since I had last spoken, and the words came out hoarse and broken. The sound was swallowed by the suffocating darkness, as if the very air around me was absorbing my cries for help. I was trapped in some kind of box, I realized. Small, confined. The walls pressed in on me from all sides, leaving barely enough room to move. The air was thick and stagnant, filled with the scent of dust and decay. Each breath felt like a struggle, as if the very atmosphere was conspiring against me. Claustrophobia began to claw its way up my throat. I tried to remember. My mind raced, searching for any clue, any memory that could explain how I ended up here. How did I get here? My thoughts were a jumbled mess, fragments of memories that refused to come together. Who did this to me? Panic surged through me as I realized I had no answers, only questions that seemed to multiply with each passing second. "Help me!" I cried out, my voice stronger now. "Is anyone out there?" Silence. The darkness seemed to mock my desperation, offering no response. The only sound was the frantic beating of my own heart, a relentless drum that echoed in the confined space. Despair threatened to consume me. Then I heard it, a faint sound, barely perceptible but enough to pierce through the oppressive silence. A muffled voice, distant and indistinct, filtered through layers of something. Metal? Wood? I couldn't be sure. It was the first sign that I wasn't alone. It was a man's voice, deep and gruff. The tone was urgent, as if he was trying to communicate something important. He was talking to someone, but the words were garbled, impossible to decipher. I strained to listen, hoping to catch any hint of what was being said, any clue that could help me understand my situation. Hope, fragile as a soap bubble, blossomed in my chest. I wasn't alone. "Help!" I screamed again, throwing all my energy into the word. "I'm in here. Please, help me!" The voices stopped abruptly. Silence hung heavy in the air, thick with anticipation. Had they heard me? Seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow, then a thump. Something shifted above me. I could feel the vibrations through the walls of my prison. They were close. "I'm here!" I cried again, my voice hoarse with desperation. "I'm trapped!" The muffled voices resumed, closer this time. They were arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Fear twisted in my gut. Why were they arguing? Were they not here to help me? Suddenly, the voices fell silent again. The only sound was the pounding of my own heart. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense with anticipation. Then a loud metallic clang echoed through the darkness. Light! A blinding sliver of it pierced through the darkness, momentarily blinding me. I squeezed my eyes shut against the sudden assault.
"Hello!" a man's voice called out. It was closer now, clearer. He sounded young, hesitant. "Is someone in there?"
"Yes!" I cried, my voice raw with relief. "I'm in here, please help me get out." I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the light. I was trapped in a car trunk. Two figures were silhouetted against the light, their features indistinguishable. The brightness behind them made it impossible to see their faces clearly, but their body language spoke volumes. They stood there, frozen, as if trying to process what they were seeing. I could make out the shape of a man and a woman, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and confusion. The woman's eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, while the man's brows were furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line.
"What the man began, his voice trailing off. He seemed at a loss for words, unable to comprehend the situation unfolding before him. He took a step closer, peering into the trunk. His movements were slow, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid of what he might find inside.
"Help me!" I pleaded, holding out my bound hands. My voice was weak, barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of my desperation. I don't know how I got in here. My mind was a blur, fragments of memories flashing before my eyes, none of them making any sense. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She took a step back, her eyes darting between me and the man, as if searching for answers. She looked as though she might be sick. Her face had turned a shade paler, and she clutched her stomach as if trying to hold back the nausea. The man, however, seemed less surprised and more annoyed. His expression was one of frustration, as if this was an inconvenience rather than a shocking discovery. He slammed the trunk shut with a loud bang, plunging me back into darkness. The sudden noise echoed in the confined space, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me.
"What the hell, Mark?" The woman's voice was filled with disbelief and fear, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. The woman's voice was high-pitched, laced with panic. She looked at the man, her eyes pleading, as if hoping he would change his mind. "You can't just leave her in there." Her voice cracked, and she reached out, grabbing his arm in a desperate attempt to make him understand the gravity of the situation. "Shut up, Sarah."
"We need to think. This changes things."
"Think? What was there to think about? I was trapped in the trunk of their car, for God's sake. Panic surged through me, hot and suffocating.
"Think about what? We need to call the police. There's a woman in our trunk."
Their voices became muffled again as they moved away from the car. I strained to hear, my heart pounding against my ribs. I was trapped, again. But this time it felt different. This time there was a sliver of hope, a chance at freedom. But what if they didn't come back? What if they decided to just leave me here? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I had to get out of here.
I thrashed against my bonds again, desperate to break free. The ropes bit into my skin, but I ignored the pain. I had to get out. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold. Metal! I twisted my hand, my fingers closing around a small oblong shape. A car jack handle. Where had that come from? I didn't remember seeing it before. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized the implication. Someone had put that there. Someone who wanted me to be able to what? Defend myself? Escape?
The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I was trapped in a game, a twisted game orchestrated by someone who clearly wished me harm.
I could hear Mark and Sarah arguing in the distance. Their voices were getting closer. I had to make a decision. Do I confront them, armed with nothing but a carjack handle and a whole lot of unanswered questions? Or do I wait, trapped in this suffocating darkness, and hope that they make the right decision? My pulse quickened. Hope was a dangerous thing to cling to in a situation like this. I needed to take control. I needed to be ready for anything. Gripping the handle tightly, I braced myself. Footsteps. They were coming back. I held my breath, listening as they drew closer. The trunk creaked open. Light flooded in, momentarily blinding me.
2 pairs of eyes stared down at me, wide with a mixture of fear and something else. Guilt? It was Mark and Sarah, their faces pale in the moonlight. But something was different this time. Their fear, their guilt, it wasn't for me. It was for themselves.
We need to talk.
Mark said, his voice low and urgent. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, his eyes darting back and forth.
And you need to listen very carefully. Our lives depend on it.
Before I could speak, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It came from behind me, from inside the car. But how could that be? I was in the trunk, wasn't I?